today to talk about one of my favorite rifles from my collection of Milsurgs. This is a Polish Karabinek Wzór 1898, or known to American collectors as a Polish K98, as these are often designated with a K98 here at the side of the receiver. And so in this video, I kind of want to talk about some of the developmental history of these rifles. I'll have a Imperial German Kar.98 with this rifle side by side to kind of show the differences between the Polish rifle and the German one, as they share a lot of design features, but there's some like little nuanced features that can really kind of set them apart. And I'll also be talking about some interesting different Polish variations of this rifle. Now, to talk about some of the developmental history of this rifle, we'll need to kind of touch on some Polish history. So, as you may know, Poland did not exist as a country for about 200 years following partition of the neighboring kingdoms. And after World War I and the provisions of the Treaty of Versailles, Poland was reestablished as a country. And as part of those provisions, it gained access to the sea, including the free city of Danzig, currently known as Gdańsk in Poland, which housed the former Imperial German Royal Arsenal of Danzig. And so Poland was able to obtain the tools, machinery, materials, and other components from that Royal Arsenal and bring it into the country. Alright, so we're going to set this rifle down for a second and kind of talk a little bit about the Danzig Royal Arsenal to kind of provide a little bit more background information. So the Danzig Arsenal produced a large number of German Kar.98 carbines during World War I. Then they kind of shifted to making Gewehr 98s, and then kind of shifted back towards 1918, back to the development of these Kar.98 rifles. So compared to the standard Imperial German infantry rifle, the Gewehr 98, which I have one here, as you can see, this is quite a big boy and heavy. The Kar.98 is a lot lighter, it's a lot shorter, and it has different sights. As you can see, the Gewehr 98 has these complicated Langevisier roller coaster sights that are zeroed at 400 meters, whereas the Kar.98 has sights zeroed out to, I think it's 200 meters, and it's a much easier to read flat tangent sight like this. So once these Kar.98 carbines started to roll out and be used by troops, it was starting to really demonstrate that the super long and heavy infantry rifle of the day was starting to become a little bit obsolete, kind of favoring these shorter rifles that are definitely a lot more handier. So at the end of World War II and the acquisition of the Danzig Arsenal, and Poland seeing that all the tools, machinery, and everything set up at that facility was really kind of tooled up and ready for producing these Kar.98 rifles, you can imagine that Poland was inclined to start producing their own domestically. And especially since the Polish military decided to settle on the Mauser 98 system as the standard infantry armament for their armed forces, it was kind of a no-brainer. Now, shifting back to our carbine at hand. So in April 1924, prep work began at the newly established Państwowa Fabryka Karabinów w Warszawie, or otherwise translated as the State Rifle Factory in Warsaw, for domestic production of a Polish version of the Kar.98 carbine, which was started the following year in 1925. So when you see those early models, they'll have 1925 stamped here on the receiver, as I don't believe that there are any made actually in 1924. So the Polish Armaments Committee recommended the adoption of this carbine as the standard infantry arm for the new Polish armed forces, despite the fact that the Kar.98 in Imperial German service during World War I was really kind of relegated to a secondary role for like support troops and all that. Although as we know from like seeing Arsenal videos, these were pretty favored by German assault troops, and they eventually snuck their way into the front lines, as it was much easier to assault trenches and enemy positions with a shorter, handier rifle than a super long and heavy Gewehr 98 type rifle. So that being said, the concept of shifting from these long, awkward rifles to shorter rifles or carbines was definitely in line with the European military trends of the time period. So now let's take a closer look at this Polish carbine and compare it to a German Kar.98 and kind of take a look at the differences between the two and see how you can easily tell them apart. So this one in my collection is a PFK Warszawa carbine made in 1927, date in production. And right above it is the Imperial German Kar.98 rifle. And look, it's 1918 Danzig, so it's likely towards, the end of World War I production. So, of course, both of these rifles are chambered in the powerful 8mm Mauser cartridge, fed from a stripper clip to an internal box magazine. Obviously, this one's empty, nothing's in the chamber, so these just get stripped down into this stripper clip retainer into this internal magazine. Got a pre-World War II box of Polish 8mm Mauser here. Got it in saran wrap just for protection, but it's pretty neat. Now shifting our attention over to the front of the rifles here, we've got once again the Polish Karabinek over here and the Imperial German Kar.98 up top. So the easiest way to pick out a Polish rifle from a German one sitting on a rifle rack is the design of the stacking hook. As you can see, there's this Polish design over here and the German one over here. Now, if you're not familiar with this stacking hook concept, soldiers can stack 3 rifles together in a sort of like teepee fashion like this by interconnecting the stacking hooks together to keep them up. And that keeps the action and the bore clear of mud and debris, and that way you can kind of have the rifles ready to go in a case of sudden action. So as you can see, the Poles had a sort of like reinforced stacking hook design here with a thick base and kind of goes out to a prong over here, whereas the German ones have a thinner curved stacking hook over here, and it's quite easily bent, and I have seen various examples where they're kind of kinked one way or another or bent up. From taking a look at a stock perspective, you can see that the Polish stocks are made of beechwood material with grasping grooves over here at the stock. And flipping it over, you'll see on the other side over here there is a sling bar over here with a sling cutout. Now switching over to the German carbine over here. So German stock design for the Kar.98s varied over time, as pre-war and early wartime production had predominantly walnut, and kind of towards the later end of production they went with beechwood, which is kind of this variation that you see over here, as premium wood stocks like walnut were very hard to come by late war periods. So another reason you can tell it's a kind of late war production is it has a takedown. Let me just scoot the camera over. A little takedown disc over here for taking down the bolt, and grasping grooves over here, which kind of make the rifle a little bit handier to use. And another key difference between this carbine and the Polish version is all variations of the German stocks have a through hole over here for the sling for it to connect to over here, kind of the same pattern that you'll see on the World War II Kar.98Ks. An additional way to tell a Polish stock apart from a German one are these telltale little dark circles or dark dots over here, right in front of the trigger guard on the stock. And on the hand guard, let's see, this one has like 1, 2, and a third one up top over here. Now what these are hardwood reinforcing dowels to kind of help add some structural rigidity to this kind of, I guess you could call it, inferior beechwood stock material. So definitely helps with making these a bit stronger and longer lasting stocks for the poles. Alright, another way to tell them apart is by taking a look at the butt plate. Now both the Polish and the German one have flat butt plates, but as you can see the design is slightly different, whereas the Polish ones end right over here at this little lip. The German ones have this additional little kind of extension over here, so the screw position on the Polish ones is kind of coming in at an angle, whereas the German ones come straight up top. Alright, revisiting the sling discussion. Again, we have our Imperial German Kar.98 up top and our Polish one down here at the bottom. So once again, the Imperial German ones have that through hole over here, and the Polish and the Polish carbines have the sling bar over here in the stock. And because the Polish Army wanted to have some adjustability with the position of the slings, there's a side slung option like it is currently over here, or an undersling option with the addition of a little sling loop here at the bottom of the stock for the Polish one. Now if you take a look at the German rifle, it clearly does not have the bottom sling loop. And shifting our way up here to the front, you'll see that the slings look somewhat similar, but the front band for the Polish rifle has a little sling loop over here at the rear barrel band, where the German one does not. Okay, with these two rifles flipped over, we'll take a look at the trigger guards between the two and point out the differences. So the trigger slot for the German Kar.98 is a lot smaller and shorter compared to that of a Polish trigger guard. I hope that's coming through on video here. As the German Kar.98 trigger is set back differently with a different back profile, whereas the Polish trigger resembles that of a Gewehr 98 or Kar.98K. And accordingly, let's see if I can get a better perspective, but the Polish trigger guard has a different profile and back action screw compared to that of the German one, whereas the German one, the action screw and the set screw, or the action screw and the capture screw, are back over here at the back of the trigger guard, whereas on the Polish rifle it's right by this little loop, and the capture screw is actually coming in at an angle over here. Let's see if I can get a closer look. And of course, everyone loves markings, right? So up top here on the German Kar.98, it's labeled as such with the serial number, and it's kind of stamped in here really crudely, but there is the Imperial German Eagle over here. Setting that over a little bit. The Polish rifle, again, it's marked K98 over here at the side of the receiver and just has a serial number. Now, it appears that this stock over here might be a Spanish Civil War version, as it doesn't match the receiver, but that's fine. Flipping both of these up top, you can see the PFK Warszawa 1927 with, I believe it's a somewhat crudely stamped Polish Eagle over here at the top. Let me see if I can get that zoomed in. Yeah. With the caliber 7.92 stamped over here. Beautiful Polish Eagle, by the way. And the German one is stamped also with the caliber 7.92. The crest and Royal Arsenal marking of Danzig with the production year of 1918. On the other side of the receiver for the Polish rifle, it's rather bare. There's really nothing there, whereas the German rifle has the, let's get it in photo here. Yeah, has the three acceptance proof marks over here on the side of the receiver. So another thing that kind of sets the two apart in terms of markings is As you know, Imperial German arms all are just kind of bedazzled with crown over fracture letter proof marks like the ones you see here. Polish rifles, on the other hand, they do not follow the same system, and instead of those sort of proof marks, Polish arms tend to have what American collectors refer to as lucky charms, just kind of these interesting kind of symbols speckled all over the place. I'm assuming that those are also acceptance markings. However, I haven't been able to find any sort of kind of translation or guide that kind of signifies what those mean. If there was like a particular factory or inspector that made those markings, who knows? Another thing with these Polish rifles that's kind of interesting is it's not uncommon for these to be found with Imperial German Kar.98 bolts. As you can, I'm hoping this is coming through on camera. There's a Imperial Eagle with the fracture over, or a crown over fracture letter over here, as these are likely leftover bolts from Kar.98 production from the Danzig arsenal that were just kind of reproportioned for the production of these Karabinek Wzór 1898 rifles. So there are examples out there that I've seen that do have Polish-made bolts, and instead of, you know, the Imperial markings here, you're going to see it bedazzled with all sorts of different Polish Lucky Charms proof marks. For bayonets, the Polish carbines were fitted with WZ-24 bayonets, like this one over here, and these fit onto the bayonet lug over here at the front of the rifle, just like that of the German Kar.98 carbines. So let me just slip that on here. And let me get this in frame. So yeah, these WZ-24 bayonets are fitted with a flash guard over here to kind of protect these wood grips from muzzle blast coming from the position of, I guess, the grips in relative location to the muzzle. And if you want to know a little bit more about Polish bayonets and service, I do have a separate video on that topic that I can link to this video. And lastly, for slings, Polish carbines have a somewhat German-looking leather sling design with a kind of crosshatch pattern that you can see here on the leather, but use kind of a simple buckle rather than that kind of complex system that you see on K98K rifles in World War II German service. And these are configured for use with the side sling loops and that sling bar, as well as the underside sling loops as well, for two different kinds of ways of carrying this rifle in service. Fortunately, with this sling, I don't think it has any definitive markings, and I'm a bit hesitant to take it apart as it's pretty pretty expensive and somewhat fragile, and I don't want to damage it any further. As far as production numbers go, the total number of these Polish carbines made during the entire production run is around 350,000, with about 190,000 being made by PFK Warszawa, like this example here, and about 158,000 made by the now famous Fabryka Broni in Radom. And I have seen examples showing production of these carbines going as far as the year 1931. Additionally, it's estimated there are around 30,000 former Imperial German Kar.98s in Polish service just prior to World War II, likely in various configurations of Polish rework. Now, as far as adoption and use in the Polish military, in the mid-1920s, these carbines were widely used by all different types of Polish armed forces, but by the time the new WZ-29 short rifle came about, these carbines were likely relegated to use by the cavalry, artillery, and other field support units as kind of like secondary role rifles. as the WZ-29 was a lot more favored by the infantry. And by 1939, there were around, I believe, 263,000 versions of these rifles in service, predominantly by the Polish Border Guard and the state police services. Now, getting into some of the interesting variants of this carbine, Poland began producing the WZ-29 rifle shortly after around the year 1929. And there were also some Karabinek Wzór 1898 carbines that were converted to meet this WZ-29 pattern. And this involved the replacement of the stock to match this pattern, the handguards obviously, and some other little bits and elements to kind of match the same design. So they are from afar kind of identical to this WZ-29 rifle that you see here, but the easy way you can tell them apart is they may still have a K98 here on the side of the receiver, and rather than having a large ring receiver like this one, it'll be a small ring with a step like our original rifle here. So if you actually do have one of those carbine conversions to the short rifle pattern, definitely hang on to it. Those are pretty rare and quite valuable, as not many were made because there was a pretty high cost of the conversion process to convert that older style of carbine into this short rifle look-alike pattern. As I mentioned earlier, there are records of about 30,000 former Imperial German Kar.98s in Polish service, and these obviously would be taken in by the various arsenals or arms depots and kind of reworked as needed, replacing German parts with Polish parts and whatnot. Like this example here is a possible Polish rework, as this is a 1917 Erfurt Kar.98 with all the Imperial German markings, but it's in a distinct Polish stock and intermixed with some Imperial German parts with the Imperial German proof marks. Now, proving whether or not this is a true Polish rework or something that an American collector did in the 1950s or 60s by piecing together like random bits and pieces of different rifles to make a complete one, it's really tough to say and really hard to prove. At least 24,000 of these carbines were sent over to aid Spain during the Spanish Civil War in the mid-1930s, and it's likely that Poland sent over their kind of worn out, well-used examples for disposal in this way in exchange for Spanish funding to produce the WZ-29 rifles, which are a lot more desirable for Poland at that time. And I haven't really seen any concrete evidence one way or another, but I don't believe that the rifles that were sent over were ever made specifically for export. I have seen many, like most of the versions that you'll see in America, they have a completely blank receiver with no markings, just marked K98 on the side over here. And like this one, they were probably refinished, refurbished, reblued, non-matching parts, and sent over as cheap Milsurp rifles in the 1950s and early 1960s. However, there are some examples that do have a eagle crest in the receiver, although those are relatively rare. And I know when I took this one apart, I actually did see Polish military acceptance proof marks on the underside of the barrel underneath the wood line. So this definitely was a rifle that was in Polish military service that was later sent over to Spain. So it wasn't like a pre-scrubbed export-only version. So I hope this video sheds some light on these interesting Polish carbines and provides some additional good information for English-speaking collectors, as there's very often some conflicting or just wrong or outdated information out there in online forums, videos, and some English language Mauser references, which I have seen that they typically just give a little brief snippet of information and then just say, you know, see the Imperial German Mauser section for more information, as they're kind of lumped together since they look so similar to each other. So my primary source for information that I've kind of shared with you guys in this video comes from this Polish language book, Karabinek Mauser 98 w Wojsku Polskim w latach 1918 to 1939. And although this is in the Polish language, I think it's still a good little reference for any English-speaking collectors that want more information, as there's a lot of very good diagrams in here, archival photos, photos from museums, as well as some reenactor photos that kind of show the whole kit and get-up. So the way that this book is structured is it kind of talks about the development of the Mauser 98 rifle in Imperial German service, and then that kind of sets the stage for the discussion of Polish Mausers, kind of talking about the kind of the Gewehr 98 version in Polish service, or Karabinek Wzór 1898, and then the WZ-29. So I highly recommend finding a copy of this if you can, and if you're really interested. I think it's around $50, can be found on places like eBay or foreign language bookstores. Definitely highly recommended.